On June 19th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky gave Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko a strict ultimatum: cut logistical support for Russia within 7 days. Surprisingly, Lukashenko complied in just 5. He ordered the shutdown of the repeater antennas positioned along the border, the specific equipment used to guide Russian drones and cruise missiles into northern Ukraine. But this retreat was entirely driven by profit. This diagram illustrates the lucrative economic loop keeping Belarus afloat. Russia currently sends its own crude oil into Belarus to be processed. Belarus runs it through their massive Mozir and Novopolitsk refineries, and then sells the resulting gasoline right back to Russia at 1.5 to 2 times the domestic Russian price. Zelensky explicitly noted that Ukraine was monitoring these fuel deliveries. If Ukrainian forces targeted Mozir or Novopolitsk, Lukashenko's most profitable revenue stream would evaporate overnight. Lukashenko looked at the options. He weighed the relatively low cost of powering down a few antennas against the devastating financial ruin of losing his refineries, and he did the math. He chose his profit margins. This rapid compliance offered an illusion of de-escalation. Behind that smokescreen, Lukashenko secured his personal wealth while providing cover for a much larger physical threat taking shape right under the surface. The head of Ukraine's foreign intelligence recently briefed President Zelensky with alarming evidence. Belarus is quietly nearing the completion of large-scale, entirely new military infrastructure along its southern edge. This map displays the 1,085-kilometer border separating Belarus and Ukraine. Intelligence has identified 5 active sectors of heavy construction spanning a vast stretch from Kobrin in the west to Gomel in the east. Workers are carving out specialized roads built specifically to bear the weight of heavy military convoys. They are erecting massive ammunition depots and establishing permanent fuel and lubricant storage bases. According to leaked Russian documents, these projects are not coded as Belarusian self-defense. They are explicitly classified as operational tasks for Russia's war in Ukraine. While Lukashenko projects a diplomatic, peaceful stance to the cameras, the concrete being poured tells the actual story. The border is being systematically prepped to launch a second massive invasion force. To understand why these new bases are so dangerous, we have to look at how Russia failed here 2 years ago. In February 2022, 30,000 Russian soldiers deployed to Belarus under the guise of training exercises, using the territory to launch a direct assault toward Kyiv. The distance to the capital was only 90 kilometers, but the advance rapidly ground to a halt. The Russian military had completely neglected their logistics. There were no proper roads, no pre-positioned fuel depots, no adequate ammunition reserves. Columns bottlenecked into 60-kilometer-long jams. Stranded without fuel and tightly packed together, these convoys became sitting ducks for Ukrainian drone operators. The offensive entirely collapsed. Every single piece of construction happening in Belarus today is designed to solve those exact vulnerabilities. The fuel stations, the ammunition dumps, the fortified roads, they are the missing logistical spine that doomed the 2022 invasion. The preparation extends well beyond physical logistics. Belarus recently altered its constitution, stripping away its official neutral, nuclear weapon-free status to legally permit what the state defines as a preventative attack. Over 500 Belarusian industrial facilities are now integrated into the Russian war machine. To enforce this alliance, Moscow has deployed advanced nuclear systems, like the Oreshnik and Iskander missiles, directly onto Belarusian soil. Independent polling shows 80% of the Belarusian public vehemently opposes entering this war. Yet Lukashenko submits to Moscow's demands because his nation's economy relies on Russia for 95% of its fuel and energy imports. Moscow holds the leash, and they can choke his economy at any moment. This map details 3 potential Russian attack vectors from this staging ground: a 90-kilometer thrust straight at Kyiv, a western flank raid severing supply hubs in Lutsk and Rivne, or a 160-kilometer expansion of the northern front to stretch Ukrainian defenses. Through calculated economic blackmail, Moscow has successfully stripped away Lukashenko's political autonomy. They have turned his territory into a fully operational launchpad, completely primed for Putin's next major offensive. Ukraine is well aware of the math, and they are not waiting for Lukashenko or Putin to make a final decision. Over the last 2 years, Ukrainian engineers transformed the unobstructed natural terrain of the 1,085-kilometer border into a heavily fortified, deeply mined death corridor. But earthworks and trenches are only part of the defense. Ukraine's most lethal countermeasure is the newly established Unmanned Systems Forces, the world's very first military branch dedicated entirely to drone warfare. These specialized drone units are already deployed and actively patrolling the northern border regions, conducting reconnaissance and establishing anti-drone nets to protect key approach routes. The scale of this technological deterrence is massive. Ukraine's domestic industry is scaling to produce 5 to 6 million drones by 2026. The commander of these drone forces recently issued a stark public warning to Minsk, confirming they have already pre-sighted 500 specific military targets inside Belarus. Belarus's official army of roughly 48,000 personnel lacks the capacity to launch an independent invasion. The genuine threat is an influx of fresh Russian units leveraging the newly paved roads and stocked ammunition depots waiting across the border. The physical infrastructure required to launch a second massive northern invasion is already in place. The only barriers standing in its way are Putin's strategic patience and the high-tech fortress Ukraine has built to tear that invasion apart the moment it crosses the line.